In most TTRPGs, selecting a class is one of the most foundationally important parts within creating a character and exploring the development of their existence. However, unlike in Fabula Ultima, a lot of TTRPGs really just make it a mechanical spotlight in combat, and that's where the role ends. It's the baseline and then quickly becomes the flatline. And of course, there's other systems that have subclasses with a little bit of theme, and maybe in the core rulebooks, there's suggestive backgrounds to give a little bit of spark and flair to the character. But I have found no other game system that comes close to Fabula Ultima that mixes class selection and story development in a way that is so wonderfully explored. And with over 20 official classes, some newly balanced bonus classes, and if you're feeling extremely adventurous, a seemingly endless amount of homebrew classes that you can find on forums, Discord, to make the theme of your adventure out of control. But with that, that doesn't make the stories any less interesting, and the combination of class and the development as they grow is one of the biggest stories that can be told in Fabula Ultima. That is why in this session of How to Fabula Ultima, we are going to talk about class build philosophy. Let's check it out. Now, before I hop into the episode, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of the awesome Fabula folk that have subscribed to my channel and the people who keep finding their way here and sharing their experiences or interest in Fabula Ultima. I am now at 460 subscribers and I'm getting close to 500, which with that, I'm going to make an announcement. Once I hit 500 subscribers, I'm going to start recruiting for a live session 0 that is going to showcase how to do some world building with a few people online and maybe take some suggestions from the people watching as well. And then I will have it posted for future views later. So I'm very excited about this progression, and I want to welcome everyone that is in the community and that we can enjoy this game together. So with that being said, we also have the Fabula Vault where I continue to stream Chrono Trigger right now for the first time I've ever played this game. I've met some great people. I've met some big time moments that I have learned to translate into Fabula Ultima where we chit chat about the game and Fabula Ultima in general. So I welcome you all aboard, whether it's through that. I also now have a Discord that I have posted in my description, and you're welcome to join as well. Now, with that being said, let's hop into the session and we'll start talking about class build philosophy. Now, a quick disclaimer before we get forward. I just want to underline the title, Class Build Philosophy. In no way, shape, or form is this video designed to tell you the best way to min-max character build, to just dominate in battle, or have the best synergies to really just be impactful in conflict. That's not what this is about. It's more about to showcase the beautiful part of the system that allows you to have continual development of not just mechanical building in the class system, but finding story relevance that leads to it throughout the progression of the game. So if you're good with that, we're going to move forward and we're going to start talking about this philosophy. So now that we understand the whole build philosophy, we're going to do a quick recap on what is important on building a class from the get-go. And that starts with all classes, if you're starting from scratch, is going to start at level 5. And the reason for that is because there is a multi-class build into the system, and it's not designed to start with one class. What you're going to do is you're going to take a minimum of 2 classes and start to find some sort of synergy that works with them. And you can go up to a 3rd class if you'd like, as long as all the class values add up to 5. So it's worth noting that if you've already invested in 3 classes to the first 5 levels of your character, you must master one of those classes to add any other classes to your character, because you can only have 3 classes unmastered at a time. And you can basically achieve that by investing your level and experience points from level 1 all the way to level 10 in one of your classes, to which then you will get your final skill point invested in that class and then obtain what is called a heroic skill, which is a very awesome addition to your character that allows you to have utility abilities in certain choices or really impactful and amplified abilities that no other class character gets to have. My favorite is the Entropist Comet. It doesn't affect combat in any shape or form. As always, in most circumstances in Fabula Ultima, we want to start from the session zero, the world build, where you and your group are collectively deciding on what theme, setting, what type of areas in the world exist that really start to make you think on what your character is going to be. Also, doesn't hurt talking over the table about what synergies you might be looking for. Maybe someone wants to be exclusively a support, while someone wants to be exclusively a damage dealer through physical means or a range based. Whatever the case, it's always great to communicate and understand what you're building into. Then, when you have that understanding and agreement, start thinking about what influences that already exist in the world. And if you're going to be like a techno atlas that's kind of this fantasy star like, where it's a very magic doesn't exist, but it's mostly tech involved, and you worry about space and maybe some ships and teleportation in those mechanical ways. Maybe it's a high fantasy, maybe it's a natural fantasy. There's atlases and books that also add classes specifically to that you can still merge together with the core rulebook classes. Either way, finding synergy that's fun, and on top of that, creating a narrative matter to why your character exists is the best part and the start of the approach of this. Now, if there's one thing I really want to focus on where I feel this video has achieved results, is to make it clear to the people that are new to Fabula Ultima or have been playing a little bit and are just stuck on the ideology of traditional TTRPGs when it comes to class. Perfect example, Dungeons and Dragons, that when it comes to building a class in Dungeons and Dragon, you select one, you have some narrative, you have some backstory, maybe you get a multi-class, maybe even two really in late game to build the synergy you're kind of looking for. But it takes a lot of time to get to that point. And a lot of times it's slow in reward to achieve that. And if you start investing in multi-class too quickly, you don't get any top end rewards of that class. And I feel like that is very stymied when it comes to you really wanting to do something new with your character. Where Fabula Ultima, it's the exact opposite. There is fast-paced EXP where you continue to level up in skill points to get new abilities or at least increase your abilities. And once you master a class, you can continue to add new things that give synergies to what you're trying to do. Or maybe you'll accidentally find something completely different that you didn't think about. But what is important to understand that Fabula Ultima creates a red carpet to really just progress quickly in mechanical values, but also give certain narrative things that you just will run across as the game progresses. And I have a perfect example of this. So in my personal game, I've continued the press start adventure. It was what I presented to my players when we first came across Fabula Ultima. It was what I ran over to them, and they wanted to continue. They loved the characters by story concept that was given to them, and they've since evolved their story and the continual growth of the world that we're in to include the dominion of the Elonian Empire and its grip over the local areas, including the Kingdom of Denova. But the one thing that didn't change at first is the assigned classes that they inherited. They took the pre-gen characters. And one in particular I'm thinking of is Edgar the Tinkerer, or the Boy Engineer, whatever they call it. And he is basically a mix match of the Tinkerer class and the Sharpshooter class. And it's your pretty token Magitech-y inventor type of character. And it was perfect for what my player originally had. But as the character continued to develop, we came over with the Natural Fantasy Atlas, and it introduced the Gourmet. Well, that same player that absolutely loves Edgar as it was built, every other game I've ever played in with her has either had her character have the chef feat or some sort of interest in food. And I couldn't think of a more better opportunity than present that class to her. I didn't say she had to take it, but she took it with no question. And in doing that, with her favoritism of having food and having these adventures that are based around culinary adventures, it's allowed me as a GM to start creating new concepts, side quests, subplots that really hone and nurture that character's desire to be that part of a class. The Gourmet itself doesn't have anything conceptually in alignment with a sharpshooter, but at the same time, it has some ideology with a tinkerer who likes to invent or create from scratch. And you also get extra inventory points if you've invested in the Gourmet class. So it's already got some unattended synergy that works great with the character. So in that example, that's just one of many possibilities where whether it's by design or just storyline given an opportunity to inspire can make a unique class build that was not originally intended. Now, for those who have an itch to scratch when it comes to min-maxing and optimizing yourself in combat, I know I have been a somewhat exclusive in that concept, but there is so many options to really choose from if you want to go that route. And it's also worth noting that even if you're investing in a particular style, if you're trying to be like a weapon master and going with berserker and all that, and that all optimizes well to each other, it's also worth noting that there are other classes that have certain just utility-based injections that will really boost what you're trying to achieve, even though the concept doesn't really sound there. And that's what's important to understand. When you select classes, they're not always just the class that is what you're supposed to be. They're pieces that build into what you want to be. And a perfect example is, let's say you're trying to optimize a caster-based character, and you have maybe the first two investments in Elementalist and Entropist. Now, both of those give you a higher MP pool, and of course have different spells and supports on your casting. But then you take that third class and you're like, okay, what do I want to invest in? Well, I guarantee you most of the time, the concept of going into the Fury class, which is your Berserker or Barbarian, is not normally in traditional thought when it comes to multiclassing with the caster. Even though the Fury class has awesome injections like adrenaline and also what is called Indomitable Spirit. And I will go ahead and list those real quick just to show what I mean as far as the concept out of the box doesn't seem really there, but there's also a synergy that just magnifies the impact of your caster. And we're going to just do a quick look at that. So in this example, I'm trying to minimize the time invested to show you how to optimize. As I said earlier in my video, that's not what this is about, but I think this is a key underline to show how you can take unique classes and build them together even though they don't sound compatible. And as I just stated, we're looking at the addition of the Fury class to Entropist and Elementalist, and the Fury is a Berserker, it's a Barbarian. And we're going to look at the two abilities that I want to properly invest in, and that is Adrenaline and Indomitable. And I'm going to pop them up on my screen while I read it real quick. But in Adrenaline, you can invest up to 5 skill points. If you see on the in the right side of the chart, it has a parentheses with a little fabulous star. That's how many levels you can invest into this. So let's say we add 5 levels into Adrenaline. It says, as long as you are in crisis, which means you are below half hit points, basically, you deal skill level, which at this point would be 5, times 2 extra damage, be with attacks, spells, arcana, items, or any other method. That means that you are going to do 10 extra damage with your spells as an Entropist or as an Elementalist, no matter the level on it. And that includes awesome spells like my favorite, Comet. But also on top of that, you can look at the investment of Indomitable Spirit, which it shows to have 4 levels as your max cap of investment. But what you can do is when you spend 1 or more Fabula points, you get an additional benefit. You choose one option. You recover skill level, which at this point would be 4 if maxed out, times 5 to make 20 hit points. Or you recover skill level, which once again is 4 times 5, 20 mind points. Or you recover from a single status effect of your choice. That right there gives you ridiculous sustainability as a caster if you need some magic points back or mind points back, or if you need hit points without asking for a heal. That is a big thing to put in, and that all comes from the concept of taking the Fury class along with casters. And there's so many other ridiculous synergies that play into whatever you just want a long-term build into. So following up with that kind of weird mishmash with the Fury, the Elementalist, and the Entropist, there's actually an injection on page 229 of the core rulebook that talks about weird characters. And personally, I think no matter how you go into this, whether it's through intent or it happens to fall over by accident, you're going to end up with some weird combinations and by translation, maybe a weird character. And that's okay, because in the snippet, it uses examples to show that just because you're investing in a class, as I've described earlier, a class isn't your fundamental approach of how you have to be. They are pieces that you're putting together as you develop to make the class the archetype you want to be, and actual narrative skill translations on how it happens. And in example, it talks about the Chimerist being a blue mage or a druid. Just because you take on that class doesn't automatically mean, hey, I'm a druid, or hey, I'm some sort of big conservationist, an animal activist, or anything like that. You can be the exact opposite. You could be this cold calculating caster that has been very scientific and technically evolving these or seeing how these monsters evolve, and maybe you've designed something to extract their abilities and put them into yourself. There's ways to go through with this. It doesn't have to be the cookie cutter template of what the class suggests, as long as you're respecting the mechanical values and giving some sort of narrative reason of why it exists in your character. And that's the best part about Fabula Ultima, is the open-endedness to be creative and work with what you're wanting to do with your builds. Now, the final thing I really want to round out the end on is talking about utility classes. And those can be more defined like the Orator, Lore Master, and by some extent, the Wayfarer. And there's other options as well. But I know there's a lot of people, especially when it goes into making characters that are conflict-based and combat only, and they really want to just be wielding swords and casting magic, and they don't want the in-betweens. And overlooking these classes can be very, I won't use the word detrimental, but a little hindering to what you can really do with them if you've spent some time looking at them. And in certain examples, you can also make a powerhouse of a character outside of combat and other conflicts, whether you're trying to negotiate or intimidate, or you're trying to evaluate certain things with your lore master's capabilities, or when it comes to traveling. The Wayfarer has a lot of awesome things that will help them replenish IP points, which can also help keep sustainability in conflicts, or also limit threats when traveling. There's a lot of great things to consider. Now, there are certain combinations that you can't double up on with people having the same class of these utilities, like the Wayfarer being able to diminish the threat level as you travel. But even just having one of those can be very impactful. And also, it's worth considering the narrative concept. You can take a character through, I'm trying to think of some sort of fiction. I'm not even trying to do fantasy. Or even a JRPG. A perfect example is in the movie Tombstone. There's Val Kilmer, who portrays Doc Holliday, who is a gunslinger, but he's super witty. He's educated. He's a higher level of education than almost anyone around him, with an exception of his rival, Johnny Ringo. And throughout the entire movie, he's very charming. He has the ability to manipulate people and even intimidate people with such a stoic presence to them, but he's also very impactful with a pistol.
You know, Ed, if I thought you weren't my friend, I just don't think I could bear it.
And just thinking about that, you could build that concept from the get-go by just taking Sharpshooter, Orator, Lore Master, and have fun with that. And you have an impactful character that can be very influential, but also be able to scrap when needed. So once again, I encourage people to not be afraid of the Lore Master because it's nerdy, or the Orator because they seem weak. They're not. They have a lot of great contributions in and out of combat that you should never really disregard. So we've come to the end of the video, and as always, I hope I've been able to articulate, be informative, and also entertaining, that's gotten you from the beginning of the video to the end. And when it comes down to talking about class build philosophies, I know I did inject a little bit of optimization, but it was important to show how the uniqueness of a character build can be put in. And I didn't even scratch the very, very tip surface of what you can do with all these classes. And most of my examples come from just core rulebook. That's not including the injections of the high fantasy, the the techno atlas, and the natural fantasy books that have multiple classes that are added into it. So I encourage you to not only get these atlases if you have not, make sure you look beyond what you think you want when it comes to a class. Also, it's worth noting that when you're doing narrative from the very beginning, also consider how these classes would be perceived in that scenario. So at the very end of it, I hope I've given you enough confidence and understanding to start building in your own approach and not be worried about just looking for templates, because that's not what Fabula Ultima is about. So, that being said, as always, I hope you've had a good day. I hope you have a great night, and I hope you find time to play some Fabula Ultima soon. Can't wait until the next video.